Hi everyone, this is Legacy School Year 7 History, our lesson number 25. This is the last chapter in Unit 5, the end of the Crusades and their consequences. We will talk about the Fourth Crusade and the Children's Crusade. We will understand how the Crusades affected people's lives in Europe and in the Middle East. So we understand that at the end of the Third Crusade, there's a truce between Salah ad-Din and Richard Lionheart. According to this truce, the Crusaders will keep Acre, which is a city in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, but Jerusalem, the city, will belong to the Muslims. And at the same time, the Muslims allow the Christian pilgrims to come and visit Jerusalem without being harmed in any way. So Richard Lionheart basically retreats from the city, and Jerusalem is in the hands of Muslims. And of course, a couple of years later, the next pope is very unhappy about the situation. It is very important that the Christian troops take Jerusalem. So Pope Innocent III calls for another crusade, which will be the fourth one. Yeah? Unfortunately, for years, the money is not collected for this crusade. So one of the Byzantine princes, Alexios Angelos, who lives in exile in the Roman Empire, he convinces the Western Roman Empire and the people to help him become the emperor of Byzantine again. And then he promises in return to raise the money for the crusade. So with his help, the Crusaders get together. They go to Constantinople, to attack the city and drive away his uncle who took the throne from him. So Alexios Angelos reaches Constantinople, and with the help of the Crusaders, he becomes the emperor of the Byzantine Empire. At the same time, after that, of course, he tries to raise the money as he had promised, but it doesn't happen. He is unable to raise this money, and the Crusaders go against him. They unfortunately attack Constantinople. They sack the city in 1204, which is obviously a terrible event because Christians are killing Christians. They were looting. They stole a lot of treasures and took them from Constantinople. And after they sacked Constantinople, they completely give up the idea of going to Jerusalem and they just go home. So the Fourth Crusade ends in disaster for the Christians, ends with the sacking and destruction of Constantinople and stealing the treasures of Constantinople, and ends in failure as it doesn't even reach the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Now, a few years later on, in 1212, the Children's Crusade starts. The backstory to the Children's Crusade is that two younger children decided to try to convince the Muslims in Jerusalem to convert into Christianity. They start speaking to their fellow or their friends, youngsters in Germany and France. There were two separate groups that decided to go on this crusade. And these children, as they gathered, they slowly start moving towards the Italian ports where they would have boarded a ship going to Jerusalem. According to historians, many of these children died on the way. Some of them returned home. They just did not want to continue anymore. A few of them reached the ports of Italy. They boarded the ships, but they were captured and sold into slavery in North Africa. And so some newer accounts say that the leaders wanted to convert Muslims to Catholicism. These children apparently heard the words of God or the calling of God. This is why they collected or they gathered all these children to go to Jerusalem. But it was another very unsuccessful crusade. Now, there were some other crusades in the 13th century, but the aim changed. As earlier, it was a very important thing for Christians to take Jerusalem, and as it had a symbolic meaning as well, not just the fact that it had the most sacred holy sites of Christianity, but the leaders, the Pope and the European countries and their leaders wanted to have Jerusalem to become a Christian city. The aim in the 13th century started to change as Christianity saw Islam as a big enemy. So when they started crusades, it wasn't always about going to the Holy Land and taking Jerusalem, but it was mainly fighting Muslims wherever they were. So mainly in North Africa. Right? So enemies of Christianity, every enemy of Christianity, and the biggest enemy of Christianity was Islam. So fighting against non-Christians, not only in the Holy Land, but also all around Europe and North Africa, was the idea behind the Crusades in the 13th century. Now, at the same time, there were threats. The Islamic Empire also had to face some threats from the Mongols, and Genghis Khan is coming from Mongolia, devastating half of Asia. He wants to be the leader of the world, and wherever he goes, he destroys, burns, and massacres. So, of course, Genghis Khan slowly reaches Iraq. He sacks Baghdad in 1258, but then soon after that he dies, so he does not become the ruler of the world. At the same time, towards the second half of the 13th century, a new, very powerful dynasty takes over. They are called the Mamluks. Okay, this is a military caste from Egypt. You can see here on the screen. You can see they come from very different backgrounds. Okay, they were mostly non-Arab Muslim slave soldiers and freed slaves serving the Arab dynasties in the Muslim world. So they were Turks, other Muslim nations from Asia, whose native language is not Arabic, and also African, black skinned people who were previously taken as slaves, and they were fighting or they were serving the Arab dynasties. But gradually they became higher and higher rank officers, and eventually they took over the leadership of Islam. So they were the so-called Mamluks. All right, so at the end of our unit, let's talk about the positive and the negative impact of the Crusades. Everything has positive and negative effects. Everything has advantages and disadvantages. Well, of course, if we think about the Crusades, all we see is obviously the killing, the torturing, the massacres, and the problems between the Christians and the Muslims. But of course, it wasn't that simple. Of course, the trading relations started between these two parts of the world. Like Venice and Genoa were two Italian ports that started trading relationships with Tripoli and Acre in the Kingdom of Jerusalem. So, of course, people started having better knowledge of each other because there was definitely some sort of relationship between the two parts of the world. New products started appearing in Europe, of course, lemons, melons, oranges, sugar, spices, and of course, gunpowder, carpets as well. Of course, other fruits, apricots, and dates were new in most parts of Europe. And of course, when when people start living together or living with each other, then they start mixing or blending. They even marry into each other's cultures. The language changes as well, and the languages take words from the other language, especially the words that do not, or these things do not exist in their language, in their culture. And for example, muslin cloth, okay, it was a product coming from the Middle East. So the word muslin cloth came from Arabic, or the word alcohol, almanac, chemistry, admiral, algebra, lemon and orange. All these words came from the Middle East, and they became part of the vocabulary of other languages, Spanish, English, French. Of course, another positive thing was the movement of people between the continents. Some of those people who settled down in the Middle East, they had a better understanding of Islam as well, and they benefited from this knowledge. People had more understanding as they started trading relations, or they started living with each other. Europe also sold timber to the Middle East. That, of course, Europe has more woods, so naturally the Middle East benefited from this trade. And of course, through the Middle East, Europe started to be much more interested in science, okay, and art. In the Middle Ages was not really the time when Europe was anything sophisticated in terms of science, art, and medicine, but the Middle East was. So through Arab scholars and mathematicians, philosophers, a lot of the old and ancient sciences and culture was preserved. It was brought back to Europe, which later on created a new era, and it leads to the Renaissance, which is the rebirth. Renaissance means, it's a French word meaning rebirth, when people started to be more interested in science again, and culture and art. Of course, there were negative impacts as well, not only the killing and the massacre and the bloodshed that it caused, but unfortunately Europe became a much more intolerant place for non-Christians. It became an extremely hostile environment for everyone who was not Christian. Europeans wanted to purge, to clean, to cleanse Europe, not only from the Muslims, but also from the Jews. And anti-Semitism grew. Anti-Semitism, as you can see in the slide, is the prejudice against Jews and their persecution. So the picture that you can see in front of you is a picture of burning Jews because they were not Christians. So this intolerance and preferring my own religion from the point of view of the Christians has become even stronger because of the Crusades. And as I said earlier, purging or cleansing, cleaning Europe from these non-Christians became everybody's goal, and the church encouraged people to fight against anybody who was not a Christian. And you can see Jews were expelled from Germany, England, and France. Muslims at that time were fewer in these countries, of course, but Jews had been there for centuries before that. So it was a very radical change that occurred in Europe due to the Crusades. So please read pages 62, 63 in your book. Answer the questions on page 63, please. And don't forget that this is the end of Unit 5. I will be attaching a question sheet. Please go through those questions. Make sure that you know the answer to all of them. We will have one revision lesson, and you will have your assessment on Unit 5. Thank you. Bye-bye.